Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited. We've got Americans in Action here with us again. Their website is americansinaction.info. And we have the strangest, as we're discovering all these truths in our world right now, there are like two realities playing out. There is the free world, God's world, and then there's basically what's been going on behind the scenes that's kind of snuck up on us, camouflaged, which is, the other side, we could say, ruled by fear, ruled by love. And it's kind of becoming more and more obvious. I feel like just like this big separation where you can tell pretty easily as you go further along in this and you realize more and more truths. Wow, that's clearly on that side of things. And wow, that's clearly on this side of things. So as we're walking down this road, we are essentially choosing either God and love or fear and the other side. So, and this was really this whole other side thing, this corrupt system and all this stuff that's been going on actually did stem from Satanists and all this stuff, nefarians behind the scenes that we didn't even know was going on. And all of a sudden it becomes more and more obvious in our world. And we're turning around going, what's happened? And then all of a sudden we realize we're in a cage and we're like, how do I get out of this cage? What did I do to get here? So we're having to go back, with these educated people, we're going back and we're saying like, how did we even get in this position? What do we do in the meantime? We're going to talk about standing today. We've talked about standing in some prior videos, but standing is some people think that once you realize you're in a cage or you realize you've been put in a cage and people are making all this money off of you and things, and we're not getting any of it. We're just all of a sudden just really defensive. People are getting angry and they're getting outraged and they're just wanting to fight and all of this. But there is a side of it. There are the peacemakers, the light workers, those of us who are connected to the love aspect, especially those who are kind of in fear and all that. You guys are kind of wobbling back and forth here. So today we're going to help kind of say, all right, this is what the love aspect looks like. That's what the fear aspect looks like. Because if you're in fear, you're also falling for all of the stuff too. So going into this, what we do is we stand on whatever side of the fence we're on, and we can't be double-minded, meaning we're walking down the middle, kind of playing both sides and saying, okay, well, I'm going to dabble here and dabble there. Or if you're going to do something like that, you can actually do it, but you got to do it mindfully and you have to know what you're doing in a sense. It's not like you're going to vanish off the planet and only go, eat organic gardens with your group over here and never interact with other people. It's not like that. You can still be in this world and operate within it, but there's a way to stand, even in your essence, even in your beingness and the way that you hold yourself up in integrity in this world and kind of walk step by step with God in a way and with spirit in the present moment. And so what we're going to talk about today is how to actually stand, meaning that your essence is known to be on the side of love. Okay. And also it impacts the other side because this fearful world, they're used to certain reactions. They're used to tyranny. They're used to, coming down on you or bearing down on you and you obeying. And we have a lot of people kind of rising up saying, I never opted into this consciously. I never consented to this in the first place. So I am saying I want my freedom back. I want the freedom I thought that I had. So we're going to talk today about the common mistakes that people make in trying to stand, but what they're really doing is being defensive and they're flying off at the mouth and all kinds of things. So we're going to talk about that today. So who wants to take it from here?
Well, Amy, I just want to say that we are very grateful and honored that you have us on your show again. You're our favorite host.
Thank you.
And it's a very important subject in regards to mistakes that people make and double-minded, which you mentioned. And what does double-minded mean, really? It means that you choose to offer or to execute trust law, and then all of a sudden you bring in some sort of patriot stuff or constitutional stuff that isn't trust law. We have to remember that trust law is in the private. And even in doing and applying trust law, the people that are involved with that aren't supposed to communicate about it because it's in the private. Once that you make it public, it invalidates the validity and the potency of trust law. And so we must always remember that that's why a lot of times even some bar attorneys would come, well, let me see what happened there. How'd you do that? And we can't tell them because it's private. And just like in court, and any judge that is familiar with trust law, and he sees that the accused or the person that's coming in there, they start applying trust law, they will often close down that session and bring you in the back room of the court where they do trust law, right? Pretty interesting. Yeah. So mistakes that people make. Ananda, what would you say the number one mistake that somebody makes that as soon as they do that, they're done? The court's going to take advantage of them and railroad them into a predetermined outcome, and we know what that is. What would you say?
Well, that's a great question. So what I would say, number one area where people get a little bit of a hiccup or a big hiccup that can really create a horrible situation or outcome is when they go into a admiralty law courtroom and they ask, is this
what's an admiralty law courtroom?
An admiralty law courtroom would be the courts as they exist today. So that's called commercial law, admiralty law, or Roman law, where you'll see a red, white, and blue flag with a gold fringe around it. And that gold fringe signifies capture. So we think that the biggest mistake is we think that we're going into a constitutional American common law court or an Article 3 court, when in actuality, what we're going into is not a government court. It is actually a corporation. And that corporation they use the word public. So when we go in there and we think that we have some rights because, we know our Constitution and based on the Bible and biblical principles and so forth. So we'll go in, we're assuming that when they say the word public, that they mean what we think it means. When I thought of the word public, I thought of the body public, we the people. When they use the word public, it means something completely different. So in their corporate jurisdiction, if you will, the corporate courts, they own public law. Public law is owned by a private corporation. That corporation is called Unidroit, and that's all caps, Unidroit, D-R-O-I-T. And Unidroit is owned by the Vatican. So you can see that when you go, oh, are you putting this on a court of record? They go, yeah. And then you get even extra certain and assertive, and you say, on a public record, because you want to make sure it's on a court of public record. They go, yeah. And they're sitting there and they're laughing at you because their terms mean something different than your terms. So it's very important when you go into a courtroom that you write out a definition list, a sheet of definitions. You define your words, define your terms, so there's no mistake on what you're talking about. If they're speaking another language called legalese and you're speaking plain old English, are you going to have a meeting of the minds? Can you have a sound meeting of the minds conversation where you understand and comprehend each other? No, you're speaking two different languages. So you must define your terms, and don't think that their public means what you think public means. It means something completely different. So when you enter in, you're actually entering into a private corporation, private corporate meeting where you're probably not an employee of that corporation and you don't know their language, you don't know their rules, et cetera, and so forth. So that's the biggest hiccup.
So what has to happen here is we have to have a realization that the court has to contract the person coming in. And I feel the number one mistake is that they answer a question that the judge would pose to them. As soon as they answer that question, they contract with the court, and they're going to be railroaded all the way to that predetermined outcome. You will be guilty or whatever. In addition to that, people have to realize there's a difference between defending yourself and standing. And as soon as you begin to defend, which that's what your bar attorney does, and just a note, if you get a bar attorney in any kind of case in the court, as soon as you contract with that bar attorney, you give away your sovereignty, you give away your right to speak, and the bar attorney is in collusion with the bar prosecutor, who's in collusion with the bar judge or administrator, who's in collusion with the bar clerk. And so what I'm saying is this: your bar attorney won't allow you to know that he is in collusion, and he will pretend he's on your side. There's so many cases where it could have lasted maybe a half an hour and the guy walk out free. Instead, he was either jailed, imprisoned, or fined, or all of the above, because they will betray you. Now, I'm going to make a statement here. Not all bar attorneys have that consciousness, but if you have that bar card, that membership to the club called the bar, the British Accredited Registry, you have to know that they will not throw each other under the bus. And here's a little known, probably an unwritten statement. A bar attorney, it's against bar rules to represent a child of God. Because in court systems, you can only deal with like to like. And if the corporation is coming after a child of God, that's not like to like. But you have to announce that. You know, we have a thing that we say two things, either administratively, or if the person chooses to go into court, which we don't recommend. Why step into the lion's den? And in that we say, we come to you as a friend of the court. We are not an enemy of the state, nor associate with any enemies of the state. You have to say that because in the Maternity Act in the 40s, they actually have a statement saying all American citizens are enemies of the state. Can you imagine that is there? That is there. You guys look it up. Look up Title 50. Look up the Maternity Act, and you'll see it in plain writing there. It's pretty crazy. So in stating that in court, we're not an enemy of the state, that negates that to exist in your case situation. Jay, do you have anything to add to that on mistakes that people make?
Well, yeah. I have something to say real quick.
Oh, sure.
I don't think people know. Everybody trusts the court. Everybody trusts the attorney because everybody's doing it around them. Everybody just assumes you have to go to courts to settle things. And what do you do if you don't go to court? What are you even talking about? Don't go to court and don't get an attorney, because they think that if they go in by themselves and represent themselves, is the way they think. If I go represent myself, I'm going to stumble over my words. I won't know the right words to say. Yes, there's so many different variations, but you can handle things administratively, and that's part of the standing. And you don't have to go in and fumble all over yourself. You might already be in the court system, you might already be there, but that's why we have to separate ourselves from the whole thing, because the way that they operate is all about gathering money. It's all about the money, and they get that from your social security number and anything that you sign or agree to, even over the phone. So you got to be really careful how you interact with people, and that they don't contract with you without you realizing. They're tricks and traps that you can fall for very easily. So the more that you can separate yourself from the whole system and all the corrupt stuff going on, child trafficking is involved behind the scenes. There's so much in it. But if you guys could avoid ever going to any kind of courtroom or ever involving any kind of an attorney in anything, I don't care if it's a divorce or whatever it is, it can all be done administratively and all with integrity and all outside of their corrupt, what do you call it? Trust law. You could do it through trust law and not go through the normal system. Could you kind of explain that? Because I think so many people don't get that. They don't understand. They think you automatically have to go, do everything like we've always been doing it. This is just like so out of the, and I remember even having a preconceived notion that if you don't do it that way, then you'll fail. Like those common law goofballs that were doing it through common law. Yeah. That doesn't work. I had that notion. Stuff doesn't work. But I didn't realize how powerful it is.
They do.
I know now.
The reason that doesn't work is because they are aggressive and they're fighting. It's not about fight. The court system works on conflict. That's what the whole thing is. Lawyers wouldn't have a job if there was no conflict in the world. So that's what it is. So we terminate the conflict. I'm a friend of the court. In addition to that, you said a comment of representing yourself. You can't ever represent yourself. You are yourself. So it's known as standing. That's the difference. So just put that out of your head that you're representing yourself. You are standing. Hi, I'm a child of God in the lineage of Hartman, that type of thing.
Yeah. You're present.
If you must go into the lion's den. If you must go into the lion's den.
Well, it's not a must. It's a choice. Here's the deal. Anything that comes from the court system, a summons, subpoena, anything, jury duty, whatever, you have to volunteer. In other words, you have to contract. And if you say yes to any of that, you just contracted. They can't do a thing unless you contract. And we've proved that over and over and over again, that if you get tricked into answering a question, you contracted. If you get tricked into going into court itself, they're liable to do anything in that way because they're actually right now, and people are realizing this, our government isn't our government anymore. It's a corporation, a foreign state. The U.S. is foreign corporation. Your state is, your county is, your sheriff is, your court is, all corporation. A corporation cannot be a government. So another thing that we started to do is we started to send back to the court system, or anyone who's doing that, we recommend certain things, and stating, hey, what are you doing? You're fraudulently representing that you are the United States government. You can't be. You're a corporation. Now, please deny that in an affidavit, legalized affidavit, because I want to hear the truth. And they never answer because of the fact we called them out on the truth. And oftentimes that's the beginning of them going bye-byes, because they realize we realize what the deal is, what the fraud is there. In addition to that, me saying what the fraud is, when you're in the case and the court system, and whatever that judge does, we know that the judge can never make a mistake, because his number one job is that he's also the trustee and he has to protect the trust. And so in that whole Admiralty Commerce court system, he's doing perfectly what he's supposed to be doing. We just have to move it out of that into the private, and then realize and communicate to them that we're a child of God. Once that happens, it's a whole different ballgame. Jay, you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think the whole premise is that people have to realize that the courts operate off of presumption and assumption. And there's a thing in law called the law of assumption. And the law of assumption is basically, for your audience, I know there's a lot of spiritualists within your audience, and you have to approach this whole dynamic of the court system from a spiritual point of view, I feel, because you have to realize that what they're doing is a lot of smoke and mirrors. And the way that works is through that law of assumption that I was just mentioning. Because when we approach the court, we basically ask them with letters of inquiry or questionnaires or so on and so forth, where do they derive their authority? If it's a constitutionally compliant court, meaning the original constitution for the republic, organic constitution for the United States of America, then the courts would be part of a judiciary system. And you can read that in the articles in the Constitution. But if it's a court that's not constitutionally compliant, then what is it? And that's what Krista was talking about. It's a for-profit corporation. And you can look up every courthouse in every state and every county. It's called a district. There's different districts throughout the entire topography of the United States. And what's a district? If you ever gone to like a Subway or any of these franchises, that's what a district is. They have district managers for that franchise. So the United States court, the United States of America, is a corporation, and they have different franchises. And then they have subsidiaries of that corporation to collect revenue for the corporation. Well, that's what the courts are. And they have different districts of the mother corporation. And the different districts are District 1 through 9. And then each district, like District 1, District 2, they all have different states of: state of Florida, state of Texas, state of California. Those are the subsidiaries, like the little subway shops within the district that the managers operate. So who's the corporate manager of the courts? Well, that would be the court administrator or the state administrator who oversees the district. But it's all different courts. So the biggest mistake that a lot of people make is that they assume, through that law of assumption, that these district courts are in fact judiciary, constitutionally compliant courts. And that's not the case. They're for-profit corporations. Well, how do you know, Jay? How do you know that they're for-profit corporations? Well, every corporation, doesn't matter if it's a court or if it's a bank or if it's this big thing on Wall Street, they have to have a corporate identification number. Why? Because how do corporations make money? They make money through revenue. Well, they have to have some sort of way to track that money. And that's called an administrative process, or an administrator. Another way of calling it an administrator would be a trustee. So, or a manager, or a supervisor. And they monitor the funds. So they get numbers. The Duns and Bradstreet is basically a tracking number for every corporation. Also, the Bloomberg reports. They track every corporation that exists universally. So we can go on Duns and Bradstreet and look up district court, superior court, district court number, whatever, in the county of, and find their Duns and Bradstreet. Well, if it was a constitutionally compliant court, why would it have a Duns and Bradstreet number? So here's that law of assumption again. The courts will invite you to be participating in their corporation through marketing. What's the marketing? It's documentations. It's get yourself a lawyer. It's credit card companies. So if you go to a grocery store, they have coupons and they have marketing and come shop here. And as soon as you enter into that store, you've contracted with that store to buy all their products and to follow their rules, or they can refuse to do business with you. But you can also refuse to do business with them. So the court sends you an invitation. Come do business with us. That invitation is through their agent. Well, who's their agent? An attorney. And the attorney sends you a summons on behalf of what? The court. To have you go into it. To do what? A transaction called a charge. That's money. And then if you pay that charge, you've done business with them. And they operate off of the assumption, the courts do operate off of the assumption that they're judiciary. And until somebody says, excuse me, I'm a state citizen or an American, so therefore I have a contract with the Constitution, That's where my law comes from, which is derived from biblical principles, which is derived from the creator. Therefore, my authority comes from God. So I don't necessarily have to do business with you. So can you please tell me where you derive your authority? And you do that administratively. So in other words, if Walmart sends you a coupon in the mail and says, come do business, do you have to do business with them? No. But if they say, no, you must do business with us, well, then they start using language and people assume, oh, well, because it came from Walmart, I should do business for them. Or if it came from a court, it says you must respond to me or you're required by law. And people think, oh, well, since they're coming from the court, like what you were just saying, Amy, that must mean I have to do something. What they fail to realize is it's an assumption. The courts are perpetuating an assumption that they have authority. And when somebody remembers that they're a living, breathing man or woman endowed with unalienable rights, as it says in our preamble of the Constitution from our Creator, which makes you sovereign or empowered, and you have choice, then you have the choice to do a business transaction with the court or not.
To emphasize that, Amy, is when you receive a summons, you know what that is really? That's an invitation to contract. So
it all is.
Right? So
Yeah.
how we recommend to deal with a summons, and please, people, you can't do this unless you know the whole picture. But we know the whole picture, what they're going to do and say and this and that. So we have the answers seven activities down the road. If we do this, they'll do that. Boom, 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 boom. So again, I don't want anybody to get into trouble. But what we do is that we just write on that summons. We do not submit. We do not consent to this. Then we send it back to them. Sometimes that's the last we hear of it, especially if it has to do with a citation of a traffic violation. But we have to realize that a lot of communications that come from the court, they're just teasing you. They're trying to, very sneaky, trying to contract you. And they may say something like, well, you're a person that does this, aren't you? If you answer that, you just told them you're a corporation, because in their legalese, the word person means corporation. And we think the word person means just you and me. No, never admit that you're a person, ever, 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 because you just by admitting that or answering that question, you contract with them and they got you.
Right.
They're fishing. Yeah. They're going all over, sending you things, doing this. Hey, you got to do that. Hey, if you don't do this, the world's going to explode, or whatever it is. No, it's all BS, really. And you just have to have wisdom, the knowledge, the courage to stand.
Yeah.
And that takes study in what trust law is. Mm-hmm. It takes study, know thy enemy, of how the legalese and the court system works. So you have to have all that background. Now, it's not difficult. It's just a matter of learning new wisdom. That's all it is. Mm-hmm. Anyone can do it. Mm-hmm. We have like teenagers or 20 years olds that they learn about this stuff. They get it. Now, what I mean by getting it is you can't keep it intellectual. If you try to keep this stuff intellectual, you will probably fail. You have to bring in your creator, God consciousness in it. And you have to learn how to allow energy and bring it into you to become one with the trust information energetically. And anytime, whether you're doing it administratively or if you choose to go into the court system, you have to have strength and confidence that you can stay in the kingdom of heaven, which means you can stay in calmness. You're not reacting in any way. You know that you are the image of God and you are God walking in the body. And no matter what they do, you know exactly what to do. A channeling starts, and the wisdoms that you have collected, all of a sudden, the right thing to say.
Yes.
Right? Comes like that. And that's being open in the heart and allowing you to be one with your creator consciously and applying this in third dimensional administrative court. That's what it is. Isn't that great?
It's amazing.
Did you have a question?
Can you explain what the role of police officers and sheriffs are? Because I know that a lot of the people, at the heads of these corporations, they know what's going on, but the trickle down, the ones who are actually writing the tickets and whatnot, and a lot of actually sheriffs don't have any idea how they're playing into this whole thing. So what is a police officer and what is a sheriff? Like, what are they really doing?
Yeah, I'm not just going to answer that, but I just want to say one thing. We have dealt with so many sheriffs throughout the years, and even constitutional sheriffs, but they maintain their position of working for the corporation and getting paid by the corporation. And if they're making $200,000 a year, and they know that what they're doing now is actually fraud and corruption, and it's against the people because the corporation is against the people, they still maintain doing that. Because put yourself in their position. Let's say a good man, a Christian, whatever, and he's got a family, and he's been doing this all his life, and all of a sudden now he's finding out this is corrupt. Do you know how difficult it is to give up $200,000 a year? And he's got to think about his family. So we got to find an answer of having that go right with the sheriffs, especially because they're elected officials by the people, and their number one job is to protect the people constitutionally. And they're failing to do this. Even good sheriffs are failing to do this. I think there's 3 sheriffs in all of America that I know about that is for doing this. And they're trying to make their county constitutional county, which would make it an Article 3 court there. I mean, it would just be amazing if all the sheriffs did that. If all the sheriffs did that right now, they had the courage to do that, we wouldn't have any of this mess going on. Did you want to say something, Ananda?
Yeah. To quote Robert David Steele, there's a lot of good people that are just simply caught up in a broken system. And so it's up to us to unravel and then rebuild. There's going to be a lot of positions for lawful sheriffs and folks that are going to uphold the law within the republic, but they are between a rock and a hard place, because where are they getting, they don't want to bite the hand that feeds. So they've taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, to protect the rights of the people, our unalienable rights. They've taken an oath to do that. And then yet they're also accepting payment from a corporation that wants them to follow policy. So what to do? It puts each one of them in a moral dilemma. And so we are literally at the time of good and evil. And what are you going to choose? So there may be a way to start integrating the true constitutional law, because it is superior based on UCC, that's Uniform Commercial Code 1-308. That is our lifeline to the Constitution, where admiralty law, or the corporate law, must yield to higher law. And we say higher law because it is higher. So you've got your water jurisdiction, which is all commerce and everything to do with shipping, right? And vessels and what have you. And then above the water is the land. That's the supreme law of the land, which is what we are. We are a republic. We're not a democracy. And democracy has to do with admiralty law, and it's more of a concept of majority rule. Now, when you get into law of the land, which is above the water, you're standing firmly on the land under God. And it has a foundation. And that is what our Constitution for the United States of America, the original organic, was based upon. So even in their own administrative rule books, they have to yield to the higher law. Now, many have gotten caught up. They've gotten caught up in the current there. And they're fighting. So it's the water jurisdiction or admiralty law jurisdiction fighting against the land jurisdiction. And so what we offer oftentimes is for folks another alternative. Rather than participating in land against water, the pirates against the patriots, is go above that. Let's climb up the stairway to heaven and go up into that higher law, which is trust law, which is everything to do with God consciousness. in God we trust, trusting our brother. They don't want us to trust each other. So now everyone's suspicious of each other and we're all accusing each other. And then the war and the beat goes on. And I always say, we don't war our way to peace. We peace our way to peace. So as we are peaceful beings, we come in as a friend at the court. We offer a remedy. We offer a solution. We forgive mistakes and so forth and so on. This is higher living. And this is how we resolve matters.
And just to clarify this, because a lot of people don't realize this. When we say law, we are not meaning statutes, ordinances, mandates, codes. That is not true law. That comes from the commerce, the corporation, in order to entangle a free, living, breathing woman, man, in their fake law. What law really is only comes from God. And there's only two laws that you really have to follow. And one of those is to always deliver what you promise and never hurt another and help your neighbor. That's it. There's not much more than that. And people need to realize that they've been conditioned to think that the court system and our government, which isn't in existence right now, it's still in existence, but it's under the covers because the corporation took over. You have to realize that that isn't true law and that there's a corporation after you, like you said, Amy, to get money, ultimately. One other thing that you have to realize, and sometimes bar attorneys do this, they go, hey, I'll take your case pro bono. And you think, oh, what a nice guy and everything. But what he really isn't telling you is he will assist the whole thing for you to lose because he and the judge and the prosecutor are going to make hundreds of thousands of dollars that they will pull from your trust, the Sesta QV trust. They will pull money from that. Each time that you go into court or you start this whole process, they take out a bond and they will ultimately gain so much money pulling from your trust. And that's a whole other workshop that we talk about and how to deal with that and what have you. But there's so many things that people don't realize. So the number one thing is the court system right now, I'm sorry to say, is very rogue. And it appears that it is against the people. This is based on all kinds of, hundreds of announcements and asking for assistance from every state in the union here and how they're being railroaded, and that it looks like that the rogue court is after making these people guilty and getting all the money from them. It's no longer of our republic. Like Jay was talking about, the original court system was a whole other animal of what it is today. And people need to realize this. And you realize this by studying and, of course, taking our workshops, going to our website, may I say, americansinaction.info. And there's a lot of information there that you can start putting your head on right and realizing what you are up against at this time. Another thing that happens is a lot of times we bring out the truth, even in trust law and everything, and they change the way that they're going to react to it or respond to it. So you have to stay up on their new reactions and changes of law and taking words out. You got to stay conscious and stay on it. But actually, it becomes a lot of fun. Mm-hmm. You actually, in confronting this, you're in the kingdom of heaven, and they're all freaking out and everything because they're not used to people actually not complying or consenting with their corruption. So they know right now there's so many people that realize this and are in active standing. They don't know what to do. They've never had to experience this before. It's pretty amazing. So just realize you have the upper hand. And number one reason is that you were with your creator. You love God. I don't think they do. Did you want to add to that, Jay?
Yeah, 100%. They don't love God. Because if they did, then there wouldn't be the rogueness that Krista's referring to. And to answer, just to add to the answer of what are the role of the sheriff and the police officers, the police, it doesn't say law on the side of the car, it says policy. POLICE is policy. What's a policy? Policy is implemented by a corporation. So what does the police officer do? They're policy enforcers to collect revenue for the corporation. So they create statutes, codes, and ordinances that Krista was talking about that are literally impossible, almost impossible to follow, but it's entrapment so that they can contract people into their system. And there's more to how people contract into their system through licensing and all this other stuff. And then the all caps name and, the person and all this other things that we won't dive into here. But they operate through the assumption. Again, an assumption is an agreement, which is a spiritual agreement that they have that people offer an assumption, and they try to reinforce that agreement through written contracts, or have people literally believe that something is what it's not. And therefore, like the court system, the corporate court system is actually a judiciary system. They want you to believe that. So belief is a spiritual thing until you override that belief. And then they bring in their police officers and their sheriffs who get paid by that very same system to bring people into that system, to perpetuate that system. So when we met with our sheriff and we looked at their statutes and we said, Sheriff, do you realize that you're the CEO of your county? Well, a CEO is corporate language. Corporations have CEOs. Churches don't have CEOs. Tribes don't have CEOs, but corporations do. The Republic doesn't have a CEO, right? So he said, no, I'm not the chief executive officer. I'm the chief executive law officer or law enforcement officer. And we said, no, Sheriff, look at your own statutes that you're paid to enforce. And we presented the statute to him. He said, I have it in my phone. I said, okay, great. We'll look it up. And it said right there with his own eyes, he read it. It said chief executive officer. And she said, well, it's right there in your own code. Where does it say law enforcement? Where does it say law officer? He was blown away, dumbfounded, like face turned as white as a ghost. Why? Because they're indoctrinated to believe something. Belief again. That's why we encourage everybody to do your own due diligence. Don't take our word for it. Don't believe us. Go look it up. Look up Clearfield doctrine. The Clearfield doctrine. Go look that up. Clearfield doctrine. They'll tell you exactly what the courts are. And it's a corporation. And the sheriff is the CEO of said corporation. And then when you read the statute, it says persons that he has to do enforce persons to do such and such and such and such, which is basically enforcing policy of the corporation. So now the myth or the belief, the assumption is that he's a constitutional compliant sheriff. And again, like what Ananda was saying, that there are good people trapped in a corrupt system through ignorance. And there are a lot of good officers and good sheriffs, and we love our sheriff. But even in their own part of what we do to get the Republic back up and running again is through education.
Today, I would like to share with you the one ingredient you need.
What's that? So anyhow, with that, what we're saying is that the sheriff and the law enforcement or the policy enforcers are there specifically to perpetuate creating revenue. Now, there's a caveat on that. As Krista was saying, there's only really one law that you need to follow, and that's do no harm unto others, love thy neighbor as thyself, biblical principles, and uphold your word, right? Statutes, everything comes out of the spiritual framework of existence. So statutes actually are kind of like a barometer to keep people in alignment to doing the right thing, so to speak, right? Stop, look both ways, right? So you don't harm anybody. So within statutes and the system, there is what's called equity, justice, law. As one of our colleagues said, there's peace in the law. So you can find it, right? However, it's corrupted and infiltrated. So part of being sovereign is you navigate through it and find a way that you can find your standing. And that'll look different for each man or woman that we work with and on your journey. So that's kind of a long answer for what police officers do. But at the same time, there's also good police officers, and you can use the system to gain justice as long as you know how to navigate through it.
As a matter of fact, with law enforcement, with police, people think they're there to protect all of us, all the people. And that absolutely is not the truth. It even says whether it's their oath or a write-up, some sort of a thing that they follow, it will state that they're there to serve the state. Whereas the sheriff is oath to serve the people. That's why he's elected, and police officers or policy enforcers are there to guard and protect the state, the corporation. So
interesting.
That's why we have police officers. We heard this about 6 months ago, where a guy was shooting the people in the school, and there were like 20 police officers, and they stood outside of the school for an hour while this guy was continuing to shoot people. How could that happen? They were doing what they're contracted to do.
Following the policy.
That's right.
And bumbling for keys. And if they had turned the doorknob, they would have realized the door was open.
Yeah.
And they could have prevented all of those.
Anyway, it's a whole setup, and people have to realize and continually research it. So many people refuse to research, and they want a silver bullet, and they don't know what they're doing. And they get one piece of wisdom and they start to try to stand, and they get all messed up with it. You have to every day research. And in that, you're going to make it your own and bring it into you. And now all of a sudden you are a potent child of God, standing to uphold God's law and the true republic. And that we have to have more and more people doing that. And that's where our workshops come in, because we train people. We give them the information. We have been researching this for a long time, and we have so much information, and we share this with people. Matter of fact, our next workshop, what we're doing is we're actually having them bring in their own cases, and all the paperwork was there. And we're going to go through it and recommend the highest thing to do in those particular cases. So they're jazzed about that. That's going to happen. May I mention that?
That'd be great.
Yeah, that's going to happen. I believe the next one is in Iowa, Des Moines, and that's going to be
14th and the 15th of August. So coming up very soon. That's right after the Red Pill event, I believe. And then the 14th and the 15th is a Monday, Tuesday, and that's Central Time Zone from 3 to 6 p.m. both days. And that will be made available online for folks who can't attend live in person. And be gentle with yourself if you say the word person in conversation, because we're all using this language that we've learned from the time we were little. But when you're doing administrative processes, or you do need to stand, you want to avoid words like that, and make sure you use the word man or woman, people, living, breathing being, and that sort of thing. So, but in conversation, we still sometimes use the word person.
Now, Amy, for you, of what we have covered so far, is there anything that you go, well, what about this? What about that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, thank you. I know that a lot of people have questions about credit cards. So what is, how is it a scam? Describe double dipping and how the whole thing works, how it's trust, and how we're kind of, we contract in with our signature and our social security number. Just take people through, like, okay, I think I want to go get a credit card, because I have always had like impeccable credit for many years, like exceptional credit, like the highest score you could have.
40 here.
Right. And so it's like everyone wants to have that high credit score, but what does it mean? And, you know, and that's all part of it as well. But if you guys could take people through the, you know, the credit card scam and help them to see, because I think a lot of people don't want to go against the credit card companies because they actually feel guilty. Well, I spent that money, I should pay that back.
Okay.
You know, so if you guys could explain that, like the mentality
yeah.
behind it would be great.
I'll begin this
Yeah.
with Jason and Ananda have so much information on this as well, and also true experience of dispensing with a credit card thing. So basically, there is no money. That's number one. Like when you get a mortgage, they never give you any money. It's all paper. It's made out of thin air. And so and people have to realize that anything that you purchase, anything, a mortgage, buying a boat, a business, a piece of clothing, whatever it is, you have to realize that in the beginning, this was all set up with Gesera Nasera already in effect, and that everything was paid for and continues to be paid for through your Sesta QB trust. Where the fraud comes in is that, let's say you get a mortgage and they give you $800,000 and you sign on the dotted line, they get paid. It's like through the Treasury, through the IMF, they get paid the $800,000 in advance. And where they double dip is they make you pay payments as if they weren't paid, that you owe it. You see what I mean? And so you have to realize that anything at all, money that you spend on the credit card, mortgages, buying a boat, whatever it is, that as soon as your Social Security is involved with it, they get paid in full. So being paid in full, including your utilities every month. The double dip is already paid, and now they're getting another payment from you monthly. That's the double dip situation. And so anybody that feels guilty on that, and that's what we're conditioned to feel, so we do be obedient and allow the double dipping. A lot of people don't realize it's double dipping. They don't realize it's already paid by the trust. Do your research. It is. I'm telling you, it is. Every single thing. And that's why a mortgage is one of the greatest frauds ever. And people are really getting that and starting to give administrative documentation in order to arrest this fraud, each person personally. You see what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you want to add to that, Jason, Ananda?
Wait, what just popped in my head is they have the key to the vault using your Social Security number and your signature.
That's
so
correct.
they go, click, open it up, take all the money. Thank you.
Not only take all the money, but they use your notes and they make other bonds and they do commerce with it internationally. They're making millions of dollars off of you. Your signature is money. Isn't that something? When you sign on dotted line, you're giving them money. So go ahead, Ananda, Jason. Who wants to go?
Yeah, well, you know, I was thinking Jay was going to really jump in.
I was, but I wanted to let you go first.
Okay, now you go and then I'll comment.
Well, just to illustrate this, because not a lot of people may have the concept, and it's a workshop in and of itself. But if you're going to go borrow somebody's car in a driveway, you see the car. You go, hey, Jack, you know, can I borrow your Ferrari for a nice weekend this weekend? And you go, yeah, sure. You can borrow my Ferrari, but I want that Ferrari back. And I want it in the same condition. And I want it full gas and everything. And here's the keys to the Ferrari that you want to borrow, right? You see that, right? He doesn't say, well, first give me an application. He doesn't say this, that, and everything. He says, please, here's the Ferrari that you can borrow. It's right there. And if you damage it or whatever, then you'll be responsible. So there's a contract, there's consideration, there's a product, and so on and so forth. You can see something that you want to borrow. When you go to a credit card company, you go to a mortgage, before you borrow anything, they say you must fill out this form first. Mm-hmm. So credit card, how do you borrow credit? Where does credit come from? It's not a Ferrari in a driveway that you can take away for the weekend and bring it back to your buddy. Credit, what do they have? A thing on the back wall, a jar of credits, and says, we'll give you this credit, and then when you're done, give it back to me? What they need in every scenario in a loan, no matter what the loan is, whether it's a mortgage, whether it's a credit card, whether it's a small business loan, no matter what is the common denominator first? They need you to take the first action. As opposed to in true borrowing, you see the Ferrari on the driveway and say, I want to borrow that Ferrari for this hot date on the weekend. And he says, bring back my Ferrari. In other words, there's proof that he has something to loan to you. And you don't have to give them anything other than your word, which is common law, that I will keep my word and bring it back to you in the same condition. Otherwise, I will breach that contract and I'll make up for it if I damage the Ferrari, harming somebody's property. But the credit card, that's common law. That's constitutional. That's biblical. But commerce is the complete opposite. I'll loan you nothing under the assumption that I am loaning you something. But before I loan you nothing, under the assumption that I'm loaning you something, you have to give me something first. And what's the thing that you're giving? You're giving them a signature, an agreement that you're going to pay them back for something that they haven't even given you. In the mortgage, it's, I want to borrow $400,000 that you've never seen, that they never even show you. You sign a document. You say, I'll pay you back $400,000 under the assumption that they have it. Then all of a sudden, you fill out a piece of paper, and then you fill out another piece of paper that says, if I don't pay you back the $400,000 that, by the way, I haven't seen, I'll give you the property. So you're giving all of this stuff, signing it over, giving it away, and you haven't even seen the Ferrari in the driveway yet. And then you sign it off with legalese and a stack of documents that you have no idea what you're reading. And next thing you know, you're into commerce and they can bring you back into that court system. And they gave you nothing other than some digits in a computer or a check after you signed a promissory note or an application and you gave your Social Security. I guarantee anybody who's listening to this call, it's not necessarily impossible, but it's very, very difficult to get any credit card, any loan, or anything without first giving that vault keys called the Social Security. You try it. Say, oh, yeah, I'd like to get a loan for, this credit card, $20,000 or a mortgage for $350,000, but I don't want to give you my Social Security card. Watch how fast that's not going to happen. So this gives you some sort of framework of how that commerce system is kind of scamical and Ponzi-like, as opposed to true borrowing, where there's actually an exchange in something like a contract and a consideration. And when for a real contract to be in existence, there has to be consideration. There has to be what's called performance, which means all the parties agree to this contract to be performed with consideration. In a loan or a credit card or a mortgage, there's no consideration. It's not even a valid contract. Right. And we delve deep into that into our workshops, but that can kind of get your wheels turning. And everything that we share to you here, you guys, everybody, we're just doing it for educational and entertainment purposes. You have to do your own research. This is knowledge. It's not to be construed as advice, legal counsel, or anything. It's information. And if you want more, contact us and we'll help you. But that should give you some sort of framework in regards to the loans and all that other stuff. Yeah.
If Jasara and Nasara is for us, which it is, then how did these rascals snag our money and scam us like this? Well, how has it even become possible that they figured out that little loophole and have been able to scam us all these years and take our trust while we're starving and barely making ends meet and not able to get groceries or buy gifts for friends or, all of that.
Two things I want to come out with that is, number one thing is a lot of people have a misconstrue of what Gasera Nasera is. And right. They think it's some sort of, okay, here's billions of dollars. No, when you look at it, the trust that they created, you are worth millions of dollars. as much as $1 billion, depending on how much they have done and how old you are, because that's as long as they've been doing international trading on it and business on it. And so when it's set up that in actual fact, from your trust, everything that you want, everything that you go and buy is already paid for. So it's set up, to me, if I want something and it's already paid for, that sounds like a Sarah to me. You know what I mean? It's like, oh boy, you mean I can go out and buy an $800,000 vehicle and a $8 million house? Yeah, done. See what I mean? Mm-hmm. So there are people that are experiencing and they're standing and know what they're talking about and how to deliver the punch there, that actually are having things paid for by the trust. Now, let me say that a different way. It's already paid for, but you have to know that it is and demand that that is what has been done. That's the truth, and the truth will stand as long as you know how to not contract with a corrupted rogue corporation. That's the thing.
Yeah. And then, as far as discharging debts and things of this nature and your credit score, I mean, I would just wonder to myself, what is bankruptcy and why does all of a sudden the debt disappear after 7 years? Where does it go? Does somebody take a hard hit because, someone else wasn't responsible? And the answer is no, nobody's taken a hit. See, because on the back end, and the trust that Christo's talking about is the public charitable trust, also called a PCT, public charitable trust, also known as the Sister QV trust. That trust was created when your mom got in alignment with the state and signed off to create the trust, which is they borrowed your Christian name or your family name, turned it into the all caps name, which is the corporation, right? And that corporation is assigned a social security number or QSIP number, and that's what they're trading. So that's what's getting traded in and accumulating with each trade. So whether it appears on one side, whether you're making money or losing money, whether you owe a debt or you paid off all your debts, it doesn't matter. As long as you're using the system, every time you sign on something, if you get a license to be a professional, if you take out a student loan, no matter what you do, you get a driver license, you open a bank account, anything you do that requires a signature, it's prompting those securities exchanges on the back end. So you could be living like a pauper and not even realize that you're a multi-gazillionaire. And once we learn to operate in trust, we can act as beneficiaries, and beneficiaries receive the benefits of the trust. And nobody owns the trust per se, but you can receive benefits from the trust. In trust, nobody really owns anything. That's why Klaus Schwab, when he says own nothing and be happy, he's actually teaching us what they're doing in the private. But the thing about it is when we, children of God, learn how to do this, we're not doing it in a greedy, all for me kind of way. Because remember, you can use this sacred wisdom for the light or for the dark. Now, it appears that the Klaus Schwabs of the world are going, hoo, 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 ha, 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 you'll own nothing and be happy. Well, in a way, he's right. But I think that he's thinking he's going to be in some superior position where he's going to be able to control all the lowly ones. But when we know who we are, we can't be controlled. And that's what's got the Nefarians freaked out. They are freaked out because we are alive and well. We know who we are. We're standing. We're developing ourselves as we go. We're finding our way. And I love what Christo pointed out earlier is that as we are standing, they keep moving the goalpost. But they've underestimated God. They've underestimated love, the power of self-trust, and putting our trust in God Almighty. This is the way, and we are finding our way and creating the way as we go. But there's so many little pieces to the puzzle. It gets very fun when you really start learning this stuff, and you just get more tools in your tool belt, and each one of us holds pieces to the puzzle. And so that's why when we come together in this unity consciousness, we really are united and we are helping each other. We're uplifting each other. As my oxygen mask gets secured, we're able to help each other. And we're all doing this together. And that's the beauty of it.
To answer your question, Amy,
I asked how they're getting away with it. Like how, because Nasara was a good thing that the Nefarians took hold of and ran with. So how were they even able to do? I know they can't do that once we have the quantum financial system up and running, which is coming soon, I feel.
Yeah.
But that's going to fix that. That's going to fix that. None of these scams are going to be able to, but I just wonder how they were able to do that in the first place, because a good thing happened for us.
I love that you brought that up, because the component that is so important, the very significant component, is one is gold backed and the other isn't. So I can't say that I'm the in-house history buff here, but way back in early 1900s, one of the Nefarians made sure that we were not gold backed anymore, right?
So in 1933, with the Roosevelt Emergency Act, and it was with the Gold Back Act, they take the gold, they gave it all the gold away in 1933 with HJR 192. And then when it was HJR 192, everybody surrendered their gold through an executive order of an emergency through the Depression, because the presidents can only start making executive orders through emergency situations. Therefore, you've seen that happening since the last few years with all the scamdemic and all that other stuff that's been going on, emergency after emergency after emergency. So now they can put executive order in, executive order in, executive order in. And in 1933, with the depression that was created, right? The depression that was created was, and then Roosevelt went in and said, oh, well, I have to make an executive order, put the country in martial law. And then they said, surrender all your gold. And those that chose to surrender their gold went, and we exchanged it to Federal Reserve notes for debt. In exchange for that, they said, okay, with no more debt, you can't pay anything. So the gift in that is to discharge debt. So how do they get away with it? The way it's been said in the Constitution from day one, that the government can only act by the consent of the government. Therefore, the way they've been getting away with it is going all the way back to what we were talking about, the law of assumption, people believing that Federal Reserve notes, aka dollar bills, is actually value. And they even tell you that because they have to disclose everything, that the dollar bill is backed by the good faith and credit of the people. When you unpack that sentence, again, it's a spiritual connotation, good faith, and then there's economic terms in there, and credit of the people, meaning living, breathing men and women who choose to go along with the assumption, and then they use their own credit because they're an actual fact. And this is beyond the scope of this conversation, but they're in the actual fact of the creditors. That's what they say. It's the good faith and credit of men and women who choose to play in the system.
Right.
And as long as that assumption keeps going, that's how they get away with it.
Yeah. And thank you for that, Jay. That was great. And it's non-disclosure. So they give us fake education, fake news, non-disclosure. So the only way that they were able to get away with it is through swindle, fraud, lies, deceit, cover up, and get people to believe this big system is real.
Yeah, that's what it is. It is certainly
with fear.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm. Fear, non-disclosure.
Now, this is very important for people to realize. You should write this down, because we've been so indoctrinated to think that presidents can make law. And that is absolutely not true. No mayor, no governor, no president of the United States or corporation has the power or ability to make law. Yet, when, let's say, the Biden crime family puts out a mandate or an executive order, and people start to say this is the new law, they're lying to the people and confusing the people. And we have to go back to the definition of what reality is, what's real. And the definition of reality is what is agreed upon. If we agree that the lie they said, it's law, that executive order is law, guess what? It is. We're the ones that agree. We don't agree because we know the truth. We know true law. And no single person can make a law, including the president. It must be legislative. It must go through Congress. It must go through the state Congress or the National Fed Congress, and it has to be voted on, and then it can become law. Then it can be ratified. And so please realize this. Any executive order does not have to be followed. Any mandate does not have to be followed. It's a choice. You're volunteering giving away your sovereignty. You're volunteering them to take your money. It's all volunteer. You know, there's a couple examples that came up even last week where a law enforcement stopped a person from speeding or whatever. And the first thing that this person said to him says, "I'm sorry, but I don't answer any questions." And he said it at least 3 times. And the officer looked bewildered and said, "Well, okay, have a good day." Because he didn't contract with them. That's really important to know. And again, don't do that until you find out the whole picture and you got all the wisdom. So this is the disclaimer here. We're not saying to do that now just because you heard it. You want to vet everything, especially with us, because we're wild children, and we love what we're doing because we're upholding God's law. And that's what everybody should do. Everybody should become an assistant of counsel. Do you know the assistants of counsel, which we are, and we assist people in standing? That's actually mentioned in the 6th Amendment. Everyone look it up, look up the 6th Amendment and find assistants of counsel. There's nowhere in the Bible or the Constitution that mentions bar attorney.
That's the truth.
Oh, by the way, just a little note. Bar attorneys came about, British accredited registry. There's still oaths to the England, the central banks, right? It came about from a guy that we laud as being amazing, Abraham Lincoln. He was a bar attorney, and he brought in the bar here. He bankrupted our United States true republic, and it made it a corporation. And that's when the word person was coined as corporation during that whole thing.
Yeah, when they revised the 14th Amendment.
There you go. So
yeah.
Anyway, updates on that.
Pretty wild.
Did we answer your question?
Yeah, and I would say here's the biggest sum up of this. The most mistakes that people make are to be defensive and not actually look into the law and know this information.
That's right.
Not have done their own studying and their own due diligence to find out, to really encompass the whole picture. Going in with confidence is the biggest mistake.
That's right. And you know what we do when we do workshops and everything? We just don't do workshops and then go away. We are family now. And anything that arises in every person's situation, we are open to answer every email, every phone call, every text. Whatever you need, we're here because we're in service to God, to humanity. And that's the way we feel. So it feels like that's credible. And that's part of our respect for the people and ourselves, that we will continue to service and help people and assist them in whatever their situation is. So even if you didn't take a workshop and you have any kind of questions or a situation, give us an email, americansinaction@protonmail.com.
And I've taken...
My voice changes once in a while. I'm doing my ventriloquist practice.
And I've known you guys for a while now, and I've learned so much from you. And I've taken your workshops and participated in everything that I possibly could. And your Q&As are just phenomenal.
Which is tomorrow.
Yes, it's tomorrow. I can't wait. Oh my gosh, they're just incredible.
How to tell them how to get on the Q&A.
Okay, if you want to get on the Q&A tomorrow, it's at 12 noon Pacific timezone.
No charge.
No
free.
charge. It's free. Anybody can come on and we do a live Q&A, and you can email us a request to get on that Zoom link, and it's americansinaction@protonmail.com. I'd like to just take a moment to also promote, we have a Pennsylvania class coming up, and that is a combination level 1 and level 2 class. It's a 3-day, September 8th, 9th, and 10th in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. So please visit our website to find out more details about that amazing class that's coming up. It's going to be, we will knock it out of the ballpark. Level 1 and level 2. So that means you can learn about the repudiation process and how to correct your status. And we're also going to be doing an extensive trust, how to express your trust.
Oh, by the way, anyone can stand. But it's an advantage if you choose to repudiate and get out of being a ward of the state, where in actuality and paperwork, administratively, they own your business, they own your property, and they own your children. That's how so many children are taken through the court system, because all the judge does is, oh, you're a citizen, we own your children, we're taking them. Mm-hmm. That's how that works. But if you are a state citizen, which is another name for state national, if you repudiate that citizenship and you now live in the private, or another way of saying that is living in the kingdom of heaven. Another way of saying that is living on the land. You're out of the jurisdiction of the water. You're out of the jurisdiction of the corporation. Now you are in the private, and you are a true child of God, daughter of the King of Kings. And that's a beautiful place to be. And that even makes your documentation even more powerful and extremely valid. Anybody want to comment on that, Jason?
Well, because your essence is in the paperwork.
That's right. Exactly. That's exactly it.
It's your essence. And we declare and decree we are living, breathing beings. We are not dead at sea. We are not corpse orations. We are alive and well. We were created by the Most High God. We celebrate life. We celebrate our fellow man and fellow woman. And this is the way.
Yeah. In actual fact, if you look at it this way, you are leaving the bondage and prison of an American citizen that they lied to you what that really is.
Right.
And you are now in the kingdom of heaven on the land. Another way of saying that is you are building and populating the republic once again. So if everyone in the U.S. did that, the corporation would cease to exist, and because there'd be no one that they can get money from. They're already bankrupt. Anyhow, that's another story. And so you're living in the republic. And that's what we need to do. We need to have the courage. And believe me, people, if you take the time to research this yourself and make it your own, you're going to get higher than a kite off of the truth. I know when I started to do this, and especially when I read my repudiation like once a month, I cry every time. Because just so you know, just briefly, to repudiate is a very simple process. You're just doing an affidavit. That's all it is. And in the affidavit, to be valid, there's 3 very important sections. The one is how you have been harmed. You state it all, how you've been harmed. Oh, God, making a law that I'm an enemy of the state, is that being harmed? I would say so. So forth and so on. And then the evidence that you were harmed. And then the remedy that you choose to have. And you sign that and get it notarized, and that becomes a legal document. So everything you put on there must be the truth, nothing but the truth. So help you God, because they can hold you responsible if you put any false statements on there. Just like when we go to the court and we say, oh, really, court? Well, what about this, this, and this? So if you say that what we're saying is not the truth, I want you to answer me back with an affidavit, declaration of truth, and you sign it. They will never do that because they're lying. They're fraud. So that's another way, and log that in there, folks. Affidavit, declaration of truth is a constitutional remedy that is also accepted in the corporation courts because it's the highest law. It's the highest truth. And when you put it in the notary, Well, the notary is part of their situation. And here's a little trivia. Did you know that 2 notaries coming together is more powerful than the judge? Did you know that you can do 3 notaries and that supersedes everything in the law? It's so powerful. It's amazing. Research this. This is amazing. Not a bad idea to become a notary.
Wow.
I know. So that is something that we have used in the past in certain situations. And we got things notarized and presented to the court, and it went bye-byes.
Wow. That's incredible.
So they have tricks of the trade based in lies and deceit. We have tricks of the trade based in God's law. What side do you want to be on? I love God.
Yay. All right. Thank you guys so much. I mean, I could just listen to this 24 hours, just have it constantly going. So thank you so much for coming on and explaining a lot of this. And every one of your videos is so incredibly enlightening and uplifting and empowering. So thank you. Thank you.
Mentioning that on Rumble, we have a thing. You look up Americans in Action and Hidden Truth News. That's a subsidiary where we do interviews with various peoples. One in particular, I want you to really pay attention to and go to it right away, because this is a woman, a 67-year-old woman that has stood so beautifully. She got a judge disbarred, and she got the police officer. He had to resign after being a police officer for 20 years or plus. And this woman is amazing. So you look up, there's 2 interviews there, and it's loaded with information.
They're posted on our website.
Yeah, also
okay, guys.
Yeah, it's super easy. You can
Marge
find it. Lewiser.
Yeah,
Marge Lewiser.
Her too.
Mm-hmm.
She's amazing. We love her. She's a brave woman that has stood, and she's not done. Let me tell you, she's just phenomenal.
Yeah, I've nicknamed her Lady Liberty. She's amazing.
So thank you, Amy. Thank you for inviting us. We always love spending time with you and your people that are listening. And we wish you happiness and joy and freedom. And let's stay in touch.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye,
Amy.
guys.
Namaste. Bye.